Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar, the latest in our weekly In the Know series, broadcast every week at this time. Today's title is Drawdown, Reviewing Suitability, and I'm delighted to be joined by a special presenter, Andy Kirby from Money Alive. My name is Jeremy Martin, a pension tax and estate planning consultant. We'd love to hear from you, and do send us in your questions via the webinar software and we'll endeavour to answer them as soon as we can. This is a structured CPD qualifying webinar and we'll send certificates out as soon as possible. The regulator has been very vocal in its ambition to continue exploring the suitability of advice, whether it's around DB transfers or the wider aspect of retirement advice as a whole. In this session, we will seek to explore this issue and try and gain an insight into the regulator's direction of travel, if you like, and what lessons and tips we might be able to pick up from this. Let me take you back to the 12th of September 2019, Harrogate to be precise, where a speech was delivered by Debbie Gupta, Director of Life Assurance and Financial Advice Supervision at the FCA. She provided some great sound bites, if you will. And now, whilst this was primarily focused on DB, I think it's equally applicable in the wider retirement context. She focused on 4 areas: improving standards, targeting firms that cause most harm, supporting consumers, and helping advisors. And perhaps the most telling comments here were the common objective was to do the right thing by your clients. A statement of amazingly obvious, I'm sure you would think, but also from a regulatory point of view, their focus was, has the client received suitable advice? Reasonable ambitions in anybody's eyes, I'm sure you would agree. She also went on to say, we will carry on learning from our continuing work on suitability, and with the admission there that many of you will already be doing the right thing. She made 2 other observations here. Fact-finding and recording clients' needs and objectives was an area of shortcoming, and also evidencing the correlation between your recommendation and your client's attitude to risk. And when thinking about clients, she offered up these thoughts, these do's and don'ts, if you will. In terms of do's, she was suggesting that we spend time on detail, which I'm sure you do anyway. Include the soft facts. Think about people's health. Consider the fact that a retirement journey could be 35 plus years in length, and over that timescale, naturally, health and circumstances will change. Perhaps even use different fact finds for different types of advice, and as ever, record all your interactions. In terms of don'ts, don't be tempted to use a template or templated tick box set of objectives. Don't shortcut on assumptions, and approach the client without bias. Indeed, beware of any subconscious bias. Now it's time to bring in Andy Kirby. Andy, what's caught your attention?
Thanks, Jeremy, for that. My name is Andy Kirby, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Money Alive. Money Alive is a client video education platform. And what I hope to show you is how we can support you and your firms with some of the areas raised by both Canada Life, but also the FCA. So let's recap on the FCA's direction of travel. Particular issues and concerns in the FCA's eyes around the number of people going into drawdown and the security they give up compared to annuity or part annuity. And their concerns are around behavioural bias. And we all have biases. We're human at the end of the day. So the first step is to recognise that and then look at how you can remove those biases. The FCA have also mentioned conflicts of interest. It's signed, posted both remuneration building up funds under management, the recurring income, and how that actually create exit value. And that could be demonstrating a conflict of interest. In fact, there's lots of academic research suggesting that advisors, when recommending a course of action over another, may stress some factors that align with their own interests, and that does include around recurring income. So the question is, how can you help remove these biases and importantly demonstrate that as well? There were a couple of slides early in the presentation titled Sound Bites. So what I want to do is pick on a few of those in the next few slides. In particular, the first one is you need to approach clients without bias. 2, challenge clients, their misconceptions and misunderstandings, because clients also have biases. Number 3, there is a recommendation that you record the interactions between you and your clients, and importantly, aim for consistency across your advice process. Now, one of the slides also made reference to retirement income survey, and I think it's worthwhile just really looking at that just to demonstrate what the essay is talking about when it looks at biases. So just to re-emphasize what Jeremy said earlier, in that survey there was a couple of questions. Would you like to buy an annuity? 10% of consumers said yes. But when it was rephrased, do you want to secure income for life? 79% of consumers said yes. So in that particular example, there was the question, is it the word annuity that people don't like? So the idea behind this is how can you actually demonstrate the removal of that bias, but actually put you and your clients in a position where you have factual information to help support the decision-making process. So as reference, what I want to do is to demonstrate how to remove bias in a conversation and also provide evidence of that. So it's about starting your conversation, your client conversation, that is, from a completely unbiased position. And the way we do this is by allowing you, the advisor, to invite your clients or potential clients to view the video content, box sets as we call them, on key retirement topics. This is factual information that a client needs to consider and also to look at their options. The content is created by pension experts. I've had input from specialist financial services lawyers, PI experts, the Pensions Management Institute, and the FCA has given us guidance as well when we created the framework for this. Key thing here is that you are building up your client's knowledge from an unbiased position. You also have an evidence report of this, which you can keep in your files. So going back to the FCA's concerns, you can see how by improving a client's knowledge on the retirement options from an independent source, you can demonstrate how you've removed that bias in that early client interaction. You can't be accused of having a bias one way or another, and your clients can then have a more detailed and empowered conversation with you on their options when they meet up with you. And it's important to say that this isn't a new area for us. We've been doing the same thing in the DB area for 2 years. Importantly, research also indicates that 98% of viewers have said that they really value their advisor offering them access to the Money Alive service. So to recap, it's in 4 stages. 1, you invite your client or existing client to the platform. 2, you provide them with access to educational interactive box sets on the retirement options. 3, you get an evidence report, and then at the back end of that, you prepare your clients for a meeting. I can't go into a lot of detail here, but please do book a demo. I'll give you details later, and we can go through this in more detail. You'll see from this slide that we have various different box sets covering retirement income areas and other areas as well. And the way that we do that, we have a box set and we build those up and we break it down into chapters. So a typical style would be start off with a summary, so a summary of the client's options, and then in further chapters we go down actually into the detail and then actually wrap it up with a case study. So we cover various different retirement income areas. I don't have time here to break them down into the various individual chapters, but more than happy to do that. If you wish to find out further details, we can give you a demonstration. You can go into the detail as well. So if you just want to drop us an email or go onto our site and arrange a demo, and we'll talk you through all the box sets that we actually have available. And it covers those approaching retirement, but also importantly, it covers those already in drawdown. So every year, for example, if you're doing a review, you can actually again talk to the clients about the options that they need to consider going forward. So details are actually on there, so I'll be more than happy to give you further information.
Thanks, Andy. Very insightful as ever. Now, what I might call client upskilling is very important given this phrase by Debbie Gupta. And here we go. Your client's voice should still come through the fact find loud and clear. The main cause of unsuitability, as far as the regulator is concerned, is that the solution does not match the risk the client is willing and able to take, whether it's an attitude to risk, making sure you evidence all those issues. Are there separate assessments of an emotive response to risk, as opposed to the ability to take risk and an affordability issue? In all of this, let's ensure that we aim for consistency, as it says there, and there's a clear link between the information given and the recommendation made. In all of this, as ever, consider the client's knowledge and experience as part of this process. Continuing our journey with the regulator's direction of travel, we had the Dear CEO letter at the beginning of the year where they were concerned about the increasing number of cases where the actions of firms were resulting in significant harm to consumers' financial well-being. It went on to discuss 4 key areas in which the consumers of financial advice were being harmed. 2 of them highlighted here: receiving unsuitable advice for their needs and objectives, hence the subject matter for today's webinar, and paying excessive fees or charges for products and services. And in terms of suitability, the FCA confirmed the pending arrival of Suitability 2. Now, that was somewhat pushed back given the issues of COVID-19, but its focus will be on initial advice as well as ongoing advice. And the question that needs to be asked here is, what lessons can we learn? What suggestions can we offer towards your centralised retirement process or your review process, and how we might put into practice some opportunities there? And here we offer up some thoughts as to what might be the constituent parts of a centralised retirement process, whether it's identifying your business advice proposition and risk management, to the review process, which we're going to explore a little bit later on in our session. And we've endeavoured here to give some indication of the relevance there from our prod, and also indeed from COBS as well. I would suggest that this whole process is subject also to constant refinement and improvement relevant to your own business model and your business style. And as I said, we will pick up some aspects of the review process later on in this presentation. So one of the most obvious external issues we're all dealing with at the moment is the impact of COVID-19. There are some implications here, how your communications with your clients might have changed from the face-to-face default to using different tools, video conferencing facilities, for example, recording conversations. Client vulnerability, the issues around that and dangers has never been higher. It's not just an issue for elderly clients, but also for many, this whole issue has given rise to higher levels of stress exacerbated by COVID-19. Clients should be assessed against any of the FCA's drivers of vulnerability, both at outset and also on an ongoing basis. And whilst this is not a vulnerable client session, it's obviously useful to have some reminders about some of the issues that clients may be facing, some things that are at the forefront of their mind, the pressure on savings there, for example, and the need to pay bills. Or it could be issues around isolation and the continuing story in the press, whatever it happens to be. All of these things will manifest themselves and perhaps change things from a client perspective, whether it's a change to their attitude to risk. For some people, it might drive them towards taking some sort of be a gambler rather than de-risk. Or the flip side of that is having a fundamental lack of interest or blaming people for outside for what's going on. As ever, in all of this, it's a good practice to record on your file notes your thoughts on whether your client has any issues or manifestations of vulnerability. And the question becomes how we incorporate this into our retirement journey for our clients. This slide here is from Langcat, and you can see how the transition is from the working part, the growing the wealth element, and you transcribe there the spectrum of risk, which is the aspect offered up by the latest paper GC23 from the regulator. In other words, every client is potentially on that somewhere in terms of their level of potential vulnerability. And as you continue that retirement journey through, it may change or manifest itself in different ways. We thought also it'd be very useful, just as a reminder, given this gradual transition from work to retirement and thinking about suitability and collection of the wealth for the retirement element, that a reminder here in terms of the sheer value of the state pension if you were to seek to buy that figure with a lump sum. And as you can see there, just over £293,000. I did say we'd come back to this picture and particularly pick up the issues around a review process, making sure it's an evidence-based review process. For example, there, look at the refreshing and update all support and process documents, the second bullet point down. Is there an opportunity there, for example, to introduce some educational services, some client educational services into the process? Or indeed, a little bit further down there, how are you factoring in ESG requirements as part of the investment philosophy, given that that's coming in next year? Are there any new tools that have come onto the marketplace that need to be assessed for their ability to help in your client advisory process? And we need to look through the lenses of suitability, if I may, the many options that need to be considered. What are the changes in the client's personal circumstances? Are there needs to be restructuring income? How that is taken? Is there a need for some sort of guaranteed element as part of this issue as well? As you can see there, nobody knows what tomorrow holds, but building a robust and repeatable process enables advisors to give evidence-based advice and their clients to make prudent financial decisions. And that quote comes from our Drawdown review guide for your information. And as we dig down into the review process, the need for information update is ever constant. And the type of review will often dictate what actually happens in that process, the level of information update that is going on. Is it a full financial review requiring a full fact find? Or indeed, is it a periodic review or a specific review just encompassing one particular area where you can use particular fact finds with relevant sections included in that process? As ever, all these choices are yours, dependent upon the needs and demands of the client circumstances there. Now, Andy Kirby touched on this particular area in considerations of bias or unconscious bias or not, and whether it's from a client's perspective or the advisor perspective. Let's make sure that we use open questions rather than closed. For example, do you want flexibility? Well, yes. Do you want to leave money to your children? Well, yes. A more rounded question would be this: what are your thoughts on leaving money to your children? Bearing in mind that for every pound you leave them, that's a pound less that you have for your own particular retirement. It gains a more considered response. As far as the FCA is concerned, from DB or safeguarded benefits, here's a reminder. If you need the secure income for your core income need, you don't transfer unless you have some specific issues that need to be dealt with, such as serious ill health. There's a needs versus wants circumstance here. Client needs an income sufficient for the rest of their lives, and that needs to be explored to the nth degree to make sure that we get that right. And just to reiterate this classic example of client bias and the need to reframe questions. Are clients biased against annuities? The FCA expects advisors to manage this particular bias. The Retirement Income Survey asked consumers who were going into retirement, would you like to buy an annuity? And only 10% of consumers said yes. However, do you want a secure income for life? 79% of consumers said yes. So the question becomes, is the word annuity itself toxic, if you like, in terms of what it manifests in the client's mind? And how do we actually manage that particular bias issue? So if we take on board the suggested approach from Debbie Gupta, that aiming for consistency and considering the client's knowledge and experience, then having a robust, consistent process can only be a sensible approach. And we will explore these sections that you can see there, some to a lesser or a greater degree. These have come from a de facto guide, Drawdown review guide, which we'll use in this section. And please make a note if you want to explore that a bit further on your feedback forms. So as we think about meeting client needs, or indeed continuing to meet client needs and objectives, we need to have an understanding of a lot of issues here. What is important to the client? What actual objectives are there? What sort of timescales are involved here? What was the client rationale for a particular objective that they were seeking to meet? How are we meeting these? And use some sort of process, something like the SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely objectives to help measure the success of meeting those needs. And if we're seeking to meet those needs, we need to gather information, don't we? We need to understand the soft facts, for example, the questions around how are you? What's going on in your life at the moment? How is your family? These soft issues. It gives you an underlying idea of the perspective of the client and where they are at that particular moment. How is your job or retirement treating you? These questions, we need to dig further than, oh, I'm fine, or whatever it happens to be. Getting the client to open up means you'll discover more about their needs and objectives and their tolerances or intolerances and timeframes that they're considering. And that needs to be bolted on to the more prosaic, the hard facts, if you like, that we all have to collect in any case. Debbie Gupta again in February 2020 this time said the best firms are capturing soft facts. They help to tell the client's story. From a regulatory perspective, they provide the evidence that the advice is suitable. And again, we've taken that from the de facto guide as well. And as we start to gather all the information and assess all the expenditure and liabilities, we need to categorize those into different elements, don't we? Whether it's core costs, whether it's utility bills or home maintenance or whatever it happens to be, or lifestyle costs, whether it's holidays or changing the car, and up the scale there in terms of any other things, in terms of overdrafts or credit cards. Let's face it, we still live in the UK in quite a debt-filled, fueled economy. And then when we do that, we need to think of some of the other issues about how do we allocate resources to that. So core costs, is it, if there's a scheme pension, can we use that to cover off core costs and head up the risk scale for other issues that are not so essential in terms of expenditure. But there are other things that have to be considered, whether it's sequencing risk or drawdown with or without protection, to cover those off. It's a risk conversation that must be had with the clients, isn't it? And as we explore income needs a little further, we need to think about the income that's being withdrawn. Is it suitable? Is it sustainable, perhaps? And whilst we're talking about sustainability at the reviews, we need to think about people's health. Do you, for example, in your process, explore the potentiality of an enhanced annuity every year by getting a retirement health form completed? That's not to say you might necessarily use that, but it will give you a great idea as to the state of somebody's health, rather than the "oh, I'm fine," quote unquote. And indeed, exploration of health is a COBS requirement, as you can see there. What about benchmarking against cash or whatever it happens to be? And the quote there, evidencing sustainability of income is a crucial factor for each review. You need to evidence that the solution is able to provide the income for the set period of time or until death within the agreed risk and investment parameters. And if income is not being met, what are the options? How do you restructure it? What issues might you stop doing or changing those objectives along the way? Could it be taking a lower income, suggesting some lifestyle changes in terms of, for example, downsizing the car? The suitability of drawdown advice depends upon that sustainability of income. Indeed, what would be appropriate here, the third bullet point down there, could you consider blending to securitize part of the portfolio that deals with perhaps the utility bills? All these questions need to be explored in depth. And as we think about cash, for example, what is the proportion of cash being held? Is it too much or is it too little? What are the reasons behind holding so much cash? Do we need to explore different alternatives to holding cash and reallocate accordingly? There are obviously some pros and cons to holding cash, but it needs to be balanced and made appropriate to the circumstances. Is it just holding enough for 3 years' income, for example? That balance is crucial. And indeed, for client protection as well, we need to review those issues. Do they still have income protection or some element of private medical insurance? What is important to them in that respect? Do we need to review the life cover or indeed whole of life as appropriate as part of this portfolio review? And does the attitude to risk or capacity for loss still match up with the client's profile there? Do we need to reassess that? Clients evolve in terms of their attitude to risk, and do we need to amend the parameters for that in the appropriate way? Do we need to consider the withdrawal rate that's going on? Is X percent, 3%, or whatever it happens to be, is that entirely appropriate now? Can we take more? Do we need to lower that figure down? Whatever it happens to be. We need to ensure the clients have complete a fresh risk questionnaire each year to ensure you continually fully understand the different risk profiles and how that is involved. A client may feel they have a high attitude to risk, but if they've barely got enough covered for their core expenditure, the reality is their capacity for loss is very low, and they can't be high risk under those circumstances. And as we consider those risks and start to think about transcribing them across to any potential investment assets or products that are being used, there's a need to explore those particular products. A selection process needs to be undertaken. Let's be mindful of prod here, thinking about the target market, exploring the due diligence and the performance and all the other issues that you can see there that need to be brought to bear, whether it's a benchmarking or a value for money type approach which needs to be demonstrated. And sustainability of income is a key factor, of course, when we're considering retirement. Receiving income expected is critically important there for the maintenance of a client's lifestyle. Certain factors need to be reviewed or explored here. What is the initial capital balance? How are we doing against that, particularly when we consider withdrawal rates or the term of those withdrawals? And some of the other things I've talked about in terms of sequencing risk already. Lots of things, variables that have to be explored, and clearly they're different when we're sort of in the accumulation phase, where we're maximising returns. But as clients start to transition into the retirement process, because for many now the line in the sand in terms of retirement is no longer appropriate. Decumulation, there is a different focus on other aspects and facets, and we have to be alive to that issue. And let's not forget what's available from HMRC here. By using different sources, there's a potential tax-free income of just under £28,000 available. We need to make sure that we use those within and interweave those into the drawdown solution, the retirement solution, to optimize what we're trying to achieve in meeting the client's needs and objectives, while still reflecting their personal values, ensuring security and sustainability, and that also works in terms of utilising and optimising the assets that are used within that tax framework, if you will. And given the potential, as I've said, for the long-term nature of retirement, possibly 35 plus years, we need to be considering such issues as what I'll call the age 75 watershed, in terms of tax changes on death benefits that may become relevant in a particular client situation, and what's going to happen in terms of beneficiaries under those circumstances. The other issue that needs to be bound up with this, I would suggest, is a lasting power of attorney in place? That actually brings to my mind a further question. At what point do you actually put a lasting power of attorney in place? Is it as you head for age 75 or a client's potential later life there? Or is it just one of the first things that you do as part of the planning process at the very beginning? Let alone things about asking questions about, is a will in place or expression of wish, and all those issues as well. There are, of course, other external factors that have to be reviewed. Is it a matter of taxation, making sure what tax allowances are being used in the appropriate manner? For example, here, what other state benefits are available with this attendance allowance, or whatever it happens to be within that? And dare I say, let's make sure that we keep up to date with legislation changes and any changes that are coming through from COBS. All of these variables have to be brought to bear within not only the initial review, but also ongoing changes that need to be actioned as appropriate. And let's think about Debbie Gupta's words, keep those in mind, i.e. evidencing the suitability for the client. Is there an option there to use some sort of suitability checklist as a means of just making sure we've covered everything off, rather than just being something that we do to make the advice process? It's an aid memoir is probably the best way to consider that. So, having gone through the entire process, from checking the client's understanding or helping them improve their education, to help in that process of identifying and discussing their needs and objectives, it's obviously best to reconfirm what's been discussed. If there are changes to be made, what is being recommended, the why, what costs are involved, what sort of potential benefits are going to be created from that, its appropriateness if you're using changes of different products, for example, and what investments are being utilised. Clearly, we need to make sure that we have a scale in terms of valuing the merit of that within the plan. It's important, its timescale, the rationale, the why we're doing something or changing something, and how the sort of benchmark is going to be met for that. It just remains for me now to see if there's anything else that we can consider. So over to you, Andy, for any further thoughts.
Yeah, for me, the key takeaway here is to look at the focus and scrutiny the FCA have placed in the DB market in the last 2 to 3 years and apply that thinking to this area. So just re-look at what you do and your plans and processes that you actually have in place. So if you can develop and demonstrate a robust process that shows that you have put client information education at the centre of what you do, and I don't think many clients will actually value that. It's worth remembering also that over the last 6 months, more and more clients and firms are moving to digital solutions to help, and you can get really good outcomes for you, your firm, and importantly, your clients by adopting the use of technology.
Thanks very much, Andy. Very insightful as ever. So there we have the learning outcomes. We've gone through the journey there. If you want to know more about the support that Money Alive or indeed Canada Life can offer, either contact them or your local Canada Life representative, and they will be only too delighted to help. As we move to the end now, if you've sent a question using the webinar software, we'll email you a response as soon as we can. Just a reminder that your CPD certificate and a link to the recorded version of this webinar will be emailed to you shortly. Also, all of our webinars from the In the Know series can be found on our website in the webinar library. So all it leaves me to do is to thank you for joining myself and Andy on our latest webinar. We'll have more soon, and I hope you'll join us again in the future. Thank you very much.